Welcome. I'm saying hello to the archive right now. We are getting ready to start the demonstration and office hour session for week 3 of the Drupal eCourse. Okay, so this week we got into content types a little bit. Content types are essentially like structures for holding your content. And all your content has structurally different... hang on a sec. I need to close my email so that those little pop-ups don't distract us. Okay, so every piece of content in your site will have some kind of structure to it. So in this week's lessons, we created 2 content types, one for images and one for events. So images and events have very different semantic structure. An event record, a piece of content representing an event, has probably like a title or a name for the event, and certainly a date, probably a location. Most events at libraries have a physical location, like story time takes place in the story time room, and board meetings take place in the boardroom. So there's some metadata to represent the location where the event takes place. Also, your events will have some kind of description and maybe a contact name and a contact email, stuff like that. And then images, like if you wanted to have an image gallery on your website, the images as pieces of content on your website will have structurally, those images will be structurally different from the events. The images will have certainly an image file and probably a caption and things like that. So in order to represent the different types of content that you're going to build into your site, you have to first prescribe some different content types. So again, these content types are just structures to hold your content. On the back end of the Drupal site, on the very back end in the database, which you never really look at least in this course, the content types have, the fields in the content types are mapped to tables and columns in the database. On the front end, from the content management point of view, the content types provide a form for entering and editing data that gets stored in the database and then later presented on the front end. So that's a very quick overview of content types. I think, though, as with anything else in this course and in this sort of realm in general, I think it's tends to be a lot easier to learn this stuff just by jumping in and doing it, and it starts to make sense as you go along. At least that's my take on it. So let's jump in and start creating our first new content type on the Drupal site. Before I do that, any questions or comments at this point? Okay, cool. No comments or questions so far. Again, if you have questions, post those via the chat box, because I can't hear you. You're muted. Okay, so the first content type that I had you guys create for this lesson was the event content type, and it's a little bit. It might seem a little awkward to be thinking about these content types more or less abstractly before we actually have something to look at on the front end. But these event nodes, the data that you input for this event content type will eventually become a calendar on the front end of your website. But we can't put the cart before the horse, so we need to create these content types before sort of in abstraction before you can actually see the results on the front end. So let's jump in and create the event content type. So here I am at my website, my demo Drupal site. I'm exactly where I left off last week. I haven't touched the site at all. So to create a new content type, I'm just going to go to Structure, Content Types, Add Content Type. So again, like here, we're not creating nodes, we're creating a structure to hold the nodes later. So you don't go to add content yet. You go to structure, content types, add content type. Every content type needs a name, and I'm going to call the name event. And then you can see that there's also a machine name for the content type. That the machine name is populated for you, but basically it's the backend database identifier for the content type. And then you can add a description if you like. So this is a description that content managers will see, so you can say something like use this content type for entering events into the calendar. And then you have the opportunity in this area to set up some default behaviors for the future nodes that we're going to create. So you can change the title field label. Sometimes for like usability purposes, you know, we want to change this field from title to something a little more specific to our content type. Maybe like event name makes more sense than title, or I could do something like event title. This is just what appears on the web, on the form that we're going to look at later when we create content. You can just leave this alone. You don't have to mess with it. It's good to take a look at the default publishing options. You can always edit these options on a node-by-node basis, and we demoed that a little bit last week, but here we're going to predefine some defaults. So I don't want my events to be promoted to the front page automatically, but I do want them to be published automatically. I don't need to display author and date information. This is like the byline, you know, submitted by Sean on such and such date. This makes sense for like blog posts and news articles, but it doesn't make as much sense for the events, because we're more concerned with the date that the event is occurring, not the date that the node was actually authored. So I'm going to untoggle that. You can decide whether you want comments to be open or closed. Because the standard installation of Drupal comes with the content module enabled, and by default, comments are always enabled for content for all nodes. You know, it's just part of the standard Drupal installation. But a lot of people want to close comments, and there was somebody made a comment on the forum this week about how you know, her institution doesn't have the capacity to manage comments, and you know, I find that's pretty common. So you know, if you don't want to accept comments on your website, you can just either disable the comment module or close the comments here in the default settings, and then you'll never have to worry about them. In any case, like, most people don't want to have comments for every content type, so maybe you do want comments on your blog posts, but you don't want comments on your events. That makes sense because, like, the types of comments that you would get on your events would be something like, maybe people would say like, oh, great session, great story time, or maybe people would say something like, you know, I noticed that your parking lot needs to be repainted, or something like that. It's just something totally random that's more like a customer service type issue that has no place as a comment on on your website. So there is a lot of management involved when you decide to enable comments. I'm just sort of going off on a tangent here, but it was something that came up this week in one of the forum posts. You know, and I've also noticed while I'm on this topic, like when Web 2.0 was a new thing, it seemed like everybody really wanted comments on everything. And now I've noticed in the last couple of years or so, people have been less inclined to want to open their sites to comments. Anyway, so we're going to close comments for our events. And we don't want any of these single events to be placed in the menu. To the contrary, we want the event calendar that we'll create in future sessions. We want that event calendar to be in the menu, but we don't want any individual event to be a part of the menu. So I'm going to just untoggle main menu from the available menus. So now that I've created some default settings for my content type, I'm going to click Save and Add Fields. And now's also a good time to take questions. Are there any questions? Comments? Okay, cool. No comments so far. Again, if you have any questions or comments, just post your comments and questions via the chat interface, and you can post that anytime, and I'll stop and reply. Okay, so now that we've created our content type, this is like the basic shell or the basic structure for adding event data to our website. We have the ability to add some fields. So the most obvious field that we're going to need for our event calendar is the date that the event occurs. Every field has a label and a back-end machine name, and this is how the database recognizes the field. And this machine name is also useful for purposes of theming and module development, back-end coding type stuff. But the front-end label is more of like the human-friendly term that you're going to use. This is what content managers see. Every field has a type, so this is like the type of data that gets stored in the database. We want this one to be a date field. If you had like a special reason to use one of these other date formats, ISO or Unix timestamp, you certainly could, but for our purposes here, we're just going to use the simple date format. If you were creating some sort of API to communicate with another event platform, you might have reason to use a different time and date format, but we're just going to use the simple date format. Okay, Kevin asks, do modules give you options to add field types? Modules provide functionality to the site. They do not themselves function as structures for holding content or fields. So if I'm understanding your question correctly, the answer is no, not at all. But modules can provide field types. So the date field, for example, is provided by the date module. And let's see if there's some other one. Oh, like the term reference field is provided by the taxonomy module. So I hope that explanation makes sense. Okay, so the answer is yes. Just not the way you phrased it. Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, cool. So yeah, modules can provide field types. So another like common one might be like phone number. Like if you wanted a phone number field, You could choose to use like a simple text field to hold your phone number data, or at least in Drupal 6, there was a phone number module that would provide a field type for phone numbers, and it would just provide some extra like semantic structure and formatting to the phone number data. So sometimes we use those, sometimes we don't. It just kind of depends on how you're going to use the data in the end. So anyway, cool. So this field type is date, and the widget we want to use is a pop-up calendar. This gives us like the little, you guys are familiar with the pop-up calendar for like booking flights and stuff like that. It's just, or, you know, hotel bookings, whatever. You click on the text field and the calendar pops up and gives you a simple way to select the date. Okay, so I've created some basic structure about my field, and I'm going to click Save. And now I can edit some settings on my field. You know, sometimes with certain types of fields, you can only edit the settings prior to creating content. So once you've created some content, the settings are no longer editable. So when you find that you need to edit the settings, you just have to delete the content and edit the settings and then recreate the content. It's just part of like the trial and error of learning a system like this. But these settings will create like some structure in the back end of the Drupal database. And once that structure is created, it's pretty much set as soon as you create some data. Anyway, for our purposes, I think we're going to need an end date for our date field. So like most of our events in our hypothetical library will have a start date and an end date. So story time starts at 1 and ends at 1:30. Maybe if these were like simply deadlines, like you know, applications are due at noon on Friday. There is only a start date, but in our case, for these events, I think most of the time they're going to have a start date and an end date. So we do want to collect an end date. However, we don't necessarily want this end date to be required. And then you can set some time zone handling. This will give the time zone handling will change the presentation of the date based on the typically based on the end user's time zone. So like, you know, I'm in Central Time, if you're in Eastern Time, and I publish an event to my website, you look at if I do want to alter the time zone handling, and then you look at it in your time zone, you could see the event at the time that it would occur adjusted for your time zone. So I say the event happens at noon, but you're on Eastern Time, so on your end it'll look like it's happening at 1 p.m., which is actually the same time. But like, I think that for physical events, this isn't really a big deal because most of you probably have communities that exist only in one time zone for, you know, when we're talking about physical events. So like usually you just want to use the site's time zone handling, and that means all events will be posted in the site's time zone, and there will be no time zone adjustments for other users. Cache dates, you can cache them or not. That's just a performance setting. Okay, so now I've edited some global settings for the date field, and now I have another opportunity to edit the settings for this specific instance of this date field. So the fields can always be reused, and there's always like global settings for the field, and then there's content type specific settings. In most cases they're going to be the same, so in most cases you'll just hit save again. Okay, cool. So I have a date field. I have a title field, a body field. The body field comes with node types by default, and then I added a new date field, and I can drag and drop these fields to change the way that they appear on the content management form on the back end. So like maybe it makes sense to have date before description. Maybe not. It's up to you. I'm going to do one more thing right now. I'm going to edit the body field. I'm going to change the label to read description. So by default, the node, the content type, comes with a field called body, but body doesn't make much sense necessarily when we're talking about event content, so description to me makes a little more sense. The standard terms of title and body make more sense for something like a blog post where we're used to creating a title for the post and a body. But for something like an event, it makes more sense to use a term like description. Cool. So I'm looking over at the assignment, and it looks like that's the only additional field that I asked you guys to make for the event content type. But I mentioned a while ago that you could also have something like a contact name and a contact phone number. You would just continue to add additional fields if you wanted to. The next thing we can do, and again, this is we're thinking sort of abstractly at this point because we haven't even created any content, but the next thing we can do is manage the display. So I can change the order in which the display is rendered. So let's say I want, the title is always going to be rendered first. Well, no, I mean, typically the title is going to be rendered first unless you hack the template file to change that. But it just makes sense to have the title rendered first, toward the top of the page. And then let's say I want the date to be right under the header, so I'll move it up to here. And then let's say I don't want the label to be shown. So I don't feel like my date, my event record needs to have a label in front of the date field. So I'm just going to hide that. I'll show you an example of what it looks like when it's not hidden. But for now I'm just going to hide it. And then you can also change the way that the date field is displayed, so you can you can mess with the settings on that a little bit, and I'll demo that if we have time toward the end. But that's good. I'm gonna I think I'm almost ready to save this. I need to move my little join me widget. You can change the display settings for okay, so right now I just changed the settings for the default display of the content. You can also add specific changes for the teaser as well. So like, let's say for the teaser, anywhere the teaser is shown for the date, for the event, let's say I just want to have title and date, but I don't even think I need a description. I can just hide the description from the teaser, hit save. So now when I have a teaser display for the events, it'll just show title and date. And when I have, like, so for my little front page event feed, for example, like events happening this week, that little sidebar thing on my homepage that I might want to do, if I only want title and date to be shown, this is one way to accomplish that, is to alter the teaser view. And then the default view will show like sort of the full record. And I think you guys are used to seeing this like on a lot of web applications where you'll see like a shortened teaser view of something, and then you'll click through to see the full view. So it's a fairly common interface. Okay, so I'm going to say that this is good, and let's jump in and add some content. So you've done this before. You click Add Content, Now I have a new content type called event. So before it was only article, basic page, web form. Now I have a new option called event, and I can click event, and I see these fields that I just created. So the event title is story time for toddlers. And the event should have a date. Let's say the story time is happening Saturday at, oh yeah, this is kind of annoying. It's okay though. You'll get used to it. So the event is happening Saturday from 10 a.m. to 11 o'clock a.m. This is shown in a 24-hour clock right now. I can show you how to edit those settings in a minute. And the description should just be come and join us for story time. Most of my examples pertain to public libraries, but story time could just as easily be like study time, right? If you're in an academic library or whatever. These are just examples. I think that the concept of an event calendar is helpful for libraries of all types. So I think I'm ready to publish this, right? I'm going to hit save. And I can see my new event. Story time, this is the title, this is the date, and this is the description. Yeah, this looks fine to me. But again, like, there's not much that we can do with the events at this point because we haven't gotten into views yet. So next week we'll start on views, where I'll show you how to query some, or how to create like really awesome front-end displays of this data, where the data is queried from the database and displayed as a calendar rather than just a single node. And it makes a lot more sense when you see it in that context. Right now, we're just sort of like entering data into the database. Everything making sense so far? Are there any questions? Cool. No questions right now, but feel free to chime in. Oh, here we go. Oh, yeah, good. Georgine, sorry, asks how to reformat the date. Yeah, that's a good question. So let's go back to structure, content types, and I'm going to click Manage Display for my event content type, and I can show the data as a date and time, or time ago, like for past events. This happened 3 hours ago, or plain as like the machine output. I'm going to keep it as date and time. And then I'm going to click this little gear on the side that lets me edit some deeper configurations. And by default, Drupal has 3 formats for date and time, and it's long, medium, and short. So you can choose one of these. Right now they're all the same. You can see next to the name of the format, you can see an example of what the format looks like, and it looks the same for long, medium, and short. So how do I reformat what long, medium, and short? How long, medium, and short appear? I can go to the date and time settings, and I can choose a different format for long, medium, and short. And it looks like there is some difference between how these are displayed. For some reason, it wasn't necessarily showing up here, but I'm going to ignore that. So Drupal has long, medium, and short formats, and I can also add a new one. So this is very common, like my custom date format. And then you have all these options to choose from. These are all different configurations of the same date. And I can also add a new totally custom format. So I'm not confined to these couple dozen options that are available. I can add something totally unique. So what happens is these dates are stored in a machine-readable way, and then PHP has some functions for formatting the pieces of the machine date into like some human-readable format. And the follow-up question, so you always have to add date in military time? The answer is no, and I'll show you that in a minute. Let's add a custom format string based on these PHP date settings. So let's say I want something like I want to display the full text of the month, January, and then I want it to say what I want it to say September the 20th, September the 20th. Let's just say I want it to say that. September the so the lowercase j. This is just PHP's way of formatting the date in a human-readable way. September the and I'm going to add the English suffix for day of the month. So this is so the first is 1 st, the second is 2 nd, and so forth. So this will show up as September the 20th, but I need to escape these characters so that PHP knows that this is not, this THE is not code, it's actually letters. So I escape it with a forward slash, and now it shows up as September the 20th. So I'm going to add this format, and then I'm going to go back to my date types, and for my custom date format, I want it to show up as September the 20th. And now let's go back to our event settings. I'm going to refresh this page, and I should have this new option available. And it's my custom date format. So I want to update the settings and show that I'm going to use my custom date format. And let's go back and look at the node. And the date is updated, so now it's just a different format. So that's how you change the date format. If you want to change the way that the date is input, like you don't like inputting your dates in 24-hour time, that's cool too. In fact, I normally do make this change, and it just kind of slipped my mind right now. So let's go back to our content types administration page, and for the event content type, I want to click Manage Fields, and I want to edit the settings for the date field. And under More Settings and Values, I have date entry options. So let's say I want to enter my dates like this. 9/20/2012. I think my server's on the wrong time zone. Sorry about that. So it's showing up in UTC time, like yeah, it's showing up in the wrong time zone. Anyway, but here's how I would enter it in a standard like 12-hour clock, and hit save. And so now if I go to, let's say I want to add a new event. Same thing, I want it to happen at 10 o'clock a.m. and I want the event to end at 11 o'clock a.m. So that's how you change it to a 12-hour time. And the final question, or the following question, so the PHP screen is another website? Yeah, that's a good question. The date format entry screen gave me that link to this page, and this is another website. This is the PHP. This is the PHP website, php.net, with all the documentation for the PHP language. So Drupal is written in PHP, so for this date format, they're just shooting us over to the page on the PHP site for like a little more background on formatting the dates. Cool. Any other questions? Okay. On most of my projects lately, I mean, nearly every library website has some kind of calendar. All the projects I've done recently have had calendars. For some reason, like a lot of people use Evanced, and so that's a third-party platform for storing events and displaying events. And most of the time, I just set up a back-end way to import the data from Evanced. But if you're not using Evanced, then you can create a calendar experience on your own in Drupal. How do you? Kevin asked, how do you set that up? Well, you set it up in much the same way as we're doing. You have to set up the content type, and then set up the views, like the calendar display that we're going to work on. I think it's next week. I don't remember. But we're going to work on a calendar display in Drupal. So you set up all that stuff, and then you can grab the Evanced data from an XML feed that Evanced provides, and there's a Drupal module that can run the importing, and it takes a little bit of time to set up, but it works pretty well. And I'm actually like I'm soon gonna, I think I'm gonna become a co-maintainer of that Evanced module. So I'm pretty invested in the module. It's called Evanced Events Importer. So the version 7 release is in alpha. Not many. It's not that widely used. It works pretty nice. And like I said, I think I'm going to become a co-maintainer soon. So it's something that I use pretty often. Okay. Any other questions? We can move on to the other content type that I had you guys create for this lesson was event or image, right? I'm looking back at the lesson. Yeah, we created an image content type. So let's do that. That's really similar. Let's just blow through that real quick. So for the image content type, I'm thinking like you guys can set up a gallery, like an image gallery. The idea is like rather than sending your users out to your Flickr page, you could just create a little image gallery on your own website for you know, images of story time or whatever else. So let's add a new content type. So again, like before we can talk about creating this gallery, before we can talk about inputting images, we need to create a structure for those images. And the way to do it is with this image content type. So I'm creating a new content type, and the content type name is image. And the description will be use this content type for uploading images. So the title field label, I can change it if I want to, but I'm just going to leave it alone. I can change the default publishing options. I don't want these to be promoted to front page. I don't want to display the author and date information. Let's leave comments open for this one. People can say like, hey, cool pic, or you know, whatever. And I don't want any of the menus to be available for the individual nodes. Because again, like I want my image gallery to be in the menu, but I don't want the individual images to be menu links. It doesn't necessarily make sense to me. So I'm going to, I think I'm happy with these settings. I'm going to save and add fields. And the obvious field that we need for our image content type is image. So I want people to be able to upload an image to Drupal, and I want the image to be its own field. So this is different than the way that we've been embedding images in the body of nodes before. Like I've told you that if you want to put an image on your homepage node, you can just embed the image in the body field. But for this image gallery, we want the image itself to be a field on its own. So when the image is a field on its own, we can take advantage of some cool dynamic stuff. In particular, like we'll be able to automatically create like smaller thumbnail versions of the image, and maybe like a medium-sized version and a large full-size version. So there's like programmy back-end stuff that we can do with the image when it's in a field on its own. So I'm going to create an image field, and the field type is image, and the widget is image. And I want to click save. Oops. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, guys. The image field is already part of the standard Drupal installation. Oh yeah, so I'm looking over at the instructions, and indeed, I told you guys to add the existing field image. If you wanted to add a new field, you could. You could say something like gallery image, but all the field names have to be unique. So because the field image already exists, I can add it here as an existing field. So the field exists in Drupal, but I am employing it now for this content type. I'm going to get through these errors. Okay, so now I can change some settings about my image. I can, let's say I don't want people to upload GIFs. I can just disallow the GIF file type extension. So no, you know, bald eagles with waving American flags in the background, or nothing like that. So I just want pings and JPEGs. I can tell Drupal which directory I want these to be uploaded to. This is which directory within the Drupal file system, so all the files that are uploaded to Drupal are in one directory, and then I can dictate some subdirectories if I want. And then I can do things like I I can put a cap on the image resolution, minimum and maximum. So this way, like, I can put a cap on the maximum image resolution so that people don't upload their like high-res images from their fancy camera. It'll force them to resize the image first, and this is good for like server performance and stuff. Like just depending on your resource, depending on your server resources, you may not want people uploading, 18 megabyte files. So I'm gonna set the maximum to 1 megabyte. There's also some server-side settings that will dictate the maximum. So depending on your hosting environment, like your host may have some settings that are lower than what you want. You'll have to talk to your hosting provider to see if you can get that raised. But anyway, I want to enable alt and title fields, so this is good stuff, alt and title. And I can, I think I'm good to go. I can also tell Drupal that I want to allow more than one image to be uploaded per node. But I think the way that the way that I'm envisioning my image gallery here is that each node will be represented. Each image will be represented by a discrete node, and then the gallery will be a grouping of nodes. And that's typically how I would approach something like this. So I'm only going to allow one image per node, and then if you wanted to create like a series, like a story time series with say like a dozen images, that would be a dozen nodes, and they would be grouped together via some other means. I hope that makes sense, because again, we're kind of thinking abstractly still at this point. But nonetheless, you can't put the cart before the horse, so we have to set up this back-end structure before we can add any content. So I'm happy with the settings. I'm going to hit save. Let's rearrange the order. And let's change the label of the body field. Let's change that to caption. And let's not let people, we don't need to show 20 rows. We can show let's show 6 rows. Let's try to keep this form real tidy. And then in my display, let's say I want the image to be displayed above the caption. And I don't think the field image needs a label. I think the field, the presentation of the content will speak for itself. I don't need the label image to tell me that I'm looking at an image. So I'm going to hide the label. Let's add some content. I don't know. I'm going to add an image. First, I need to get a good image that I want to use. I'll just find something on my hard drive. I think this might be a good one. Yeah, it's a little cat. It's a kitten. So, we love kittens as librarians. So the post needs a title. Let's provide some alt text and some title text, and it can be like, "This is my kitty." And then the caption can be something a little bit longer. "This is a picture of my cat Marbles. That's not really my cat's name. Okay, so now I can create some. I can edit some settings. I want to leave comments open. I'm happy with all this, so I'm going to hit save. Okay, so here's my node with a title displayed and a kitten and my caption. And if I roll over this cat image, I can see the alt text pop up. So this is looking pretty good. There are some really cool settings in Drupal that will allow you to edit the images, scale and crop the images on the server side. So if this is not a great example because the image is already quite small, but if I had uploaded a huge image and I wanted Drupal to do some of the scaling and cropping for me, I could. And I don't think we have a lot of time to show that, but it's really important. The first place to start editing the image configuration is over here in Manage Display. And again, I'm going to click this little gear icon to open up some additional display settings. And these image styles are what I was referring to earlier. Drupal can, on the server side, Drupal will create different versions of the image for thumbnail, medium, and large. My image that I uploaded is already quite small, but if I had uploaded a huge image that didn't really fit on the page, I would want to resize it. And Drupal does this resizing by creating a new version of the image. So it's not scaled in the browser; it's actually resized on the server side, and the correct size is presented to the user in the browser. So let's say, just for fun, I actually wanted. So like I said, my image is already quite small, but let's say for some reason I wanted to make it a little smaller. I could choose for this to be displayed as a thumbnail. Now let's go back to the node, and it should refresh and show it as a smaller version. This is a really handy way to manipulate images, and we use this on just about every site because typically you're going to want like a little thumbnail for the teaser page and then a fuller version for the full view. You can take a look at more of the image styles settings over here in configuration, image styles. So you have a few available to you already, and then you can add as many new styles as you want. It's a cool thing to play around with. Any questions or anything? Okay, no questions at the moment. We have like about 5 minutes left, so I think that a valuable use of the 5 minutes would be to show you how to add a new image style. So let's go ahead and do that. So I clicked Add Style, and I want this to be my style name. Let's call it Extra Large. I usually name oh, I'm sorry. It needs to be like lowercase alphanumeric characters. Extra large image. I usually name this something a little more descriptive, like 600 pixels wide, something like that. That's just my own habit, my own naming convention. That way I can look at it later and I know exactly what it means. But something like extra large image would also be fine. And now I have some really cool functions that I can use to resize the image on the server side. This is really cool. So typically I will use, well, it just depends. We know we don't want the image to be scaled into a different proportion than it was originally, so we don't want to distort the image. So depending on what images, what aspect ratios are being uploaded will determine how I approach these operations, and also how I want the images displayed. It's a fairly logical, I guess it's a pretty deductive process of deciding which operation you want, and you'll just get used to this by experimenting. But let's just say I want to scale the image. So no cropping, but I do want to scale it. At least one value here is required. So I want to scale my images to 600 pixels wide, but I want the height to be automatically determined based on the aspect ratio of the original upload. And I don't want to allow upscaling. So my little picture of my kitten will not be upscaled to 600 pixels wide, but anything larger than that will be scaled down. So add effect. My effect is now in place. You can add multiple operations here. So I could like rotate the image if I wanted to. I could desaturate. I could make it black and white. And so forth. And then you can also provide your own operations in code, but these are the ones that are available through our server-side image manipulation functions. So now that I've added this new image, I can go back to my content type and manage display and reformat this image field to show my extra large image. It's not going to change the display of my kitten image. See, it's just shown as the original size, but if I had uploaded a much larger image, it would be, at this point, scaled down to 600 pixels wide. So it's a really cool feature. It comes with Drupal core, and we use it all the time. It's really handy to know. Cool. Any last minute questions or comments? We have like about a minute left in the hour, but I can stick around a little longer. Oh, so each time you have to upload the image again? No. When you create these new image styles, Drupal does the manipulation. Drupal does the manipulation on the back end. So you upload the image once, and Drupal will do the manipulation. It's kind of like Flickr, where you upload your image once to Flickr, and Flickr creates a bunch of different sizes for you. Kevin asks, do you have like a manual for that events setup? No, I don't. This is usually just something I work on with clients, and any documentation I provide is just for clients. So other than like the documentation that comes with the module, like in the README file, there isn't really. I can't provide. I don't have anything else to provide. Sorry. Follow-up question about the images. So you can show it on many pages or views with different filters. Yes. Yeah, you can show the different styles for different. You can determine which image style you want to display for every context. So on this such and such view, you want to display a thumbnail, but on this other view over here, you want to display the medium-sized version, and then for the full page display, you want the extra large version. So you have a lot of control over that. It's pretty cool. Any more questions? Okay, before we go, I posted to the forum, but I want to just say here, we have a new guest instructor of sorts for this class, Ken Varnum, who actually just published a book about Drupal in libraries. And I'm really happy to have him on board to help out with some of the discussion, forum discussions and stuff. And he's taking over teaching the course after this session. I'm not doing the course anymore, so he's taking over. So I'm kind of like passing the torch by inviting him to join in on the discussions. So yeah, look for his input in the forums. And thanks again for coming to the office hours session. Look forward to talking more next week. Okay, talk to you later. Bye.